Yoshua Bengio, thank you for joining. We have the NeurIPS Conference Center in the background. The sun has just gone down here in San Diego. It's supposed to be warm here. I'm not very warm sitting out here in the wind. But
it's a desert weather, so
that's true. I live in LA,
nice
not
cold.
very far away, and I'm used to it being cold. So I came prepared with multiple sweatshirts. Thanks for taking time to chat. I'm excited to dive into geopolitics, to open versus closed source AI, and let's just jump right in. And I'd like to talk about what you're working on, a nonprofit called Law Zero. Yes. And maybe start with that.
Asimov's laws of robotics were corrected by Asimov. He added, after the laws 1, 2, 3, he added Law Zero, which is about protecting humanity or not harming humanity, because Law 1 was not harming a human. And
too specific.
Yes. Sometimes you may have to harm a human to save humanity.
And so he corrected himself by adding a 4th or 0th law that precedes all the others.
Yes.
And why did you name your nonprofit after that law?
Because I feel like AI is going to change the world if things continue on the current course and we don't hit a wall. It's a plausible scenario. And the power of intelligence is going to give power to whoever controls it, including potentially AIs that could be smarter than us, including dictators. This is a threat to our democracies in many ways, because democracy is about sharing power. If it is possible for one individual, one government, one company to hold huge advantage against other human beings, then it's a huge threat in many ways.
And do I think you said you think it's possible. Do you think it's very likely that we are on this path, given the trends that we're seeing right now and progress being made?
I don't see any reason scientifically to think that human intelligence is the apex of intelligence. And the data is very clear on the capabilities continue to advance in spite of, ups and downs and so on. But essentially, over a period of multiple years or a decade, the trends are very strong. There's uncertainty because, science moves in ways that are unpredictable, but there's so much investment in all this. There's never been, I think, any scientific domain that has been receiving as much money to move forward.
I guess it's unprecedented, the level of investment.
It's completely unprecedented. And of course, the economic price is estimated to be huge, much more than the kind of order of $1 trillion that people have invested already.
The price to get to it, like what it will cost us to achieve it, or the
no. The rewards. The rewards would be on the order of quadrillions, and now we're investing on the order of trillions.
Got it. So it's a great investment for humanity if we can respect Law Zero. It seems.
Exactly.
And I was interested that you quickly brought up democracy in your thoughts on Law Zero, that defending humanity, thing, or what is the exact phrasing of Law Zero? Like, do not harm humanity?
Yes.
Okay. Would you go and say something stronger, just benefit humanity?
Of course.
Because I guess they could just go away and not harm us, just fly off into space.
No, absolutely. So, shifting gears a bit into geopolitics, if I think of a future where the dangers of misuse or loss of control are managed, it would have to be a future where there's a global agreement on what to do and not do, where countries or whatever are the political units at that time agree that they don't do something foolish with AI in terms of responsibly developing it, safely developing it. And they also commit to not use AI to dominate others, because it's going to be very tempting. I mean, it's in human nature to try to dominate others for your own benefit. And then finally,
we have not alleviated war.
So that's the negative side. But the positive side is also, we also have to make sure everyone benefits, right? Which is not a given either. Do you think really that if the US becomes very, very rich because of AI, they're going to share the wealth with the whole planet? I don't see that on my crystal ball right now.
That makes a lot of sense to me. So getting specific, right now, if there were to be a few players, and one interesting thing about this is the amount of money it takes to fund it. People are talking about $1 trillion now, maybe many trillions over the next 5-10 years.
Well, trillion is the whole ecosystem, all the investors right now on the planet. are putting on the order of 1 trillion or 2, depending on how far into the future you look. But individual runs are still much cheaper than that.
The amount of, even for individual runs, the amount of the cost makes it prohibitive. Also, the size of the organization, unprecedentedly large research organizations working in concert. Most of the none of the organizations are governments right now who are in the lead.
Unlike nuclear, for example.
Yeah, very strong difference between nuclear.
Yes.
You said you kept it generic when you talked about units of control in the future. Thought that might have been an intentional thing.
Yes.
Could you see a world in which the controlling entities, let's play it forward, OpenAI, Anthropic, Microsoft, let's say others, Mistral and whoever is like not in the lead right now, but comes out from behind. Are those the entities that, just if you play it forward, is that straightforward?
No, that's not democratic. In an ideal world, everyone on this planet has a voice and sees the benefit of AI and is protected from its misuse.
Is that the path you would imagine we are on if something like Law Zero doesn't step in to ensure democratic and bringing governments back into it?
We can do our share to move in the right direction, but obviously it's going to take many people with goodwill in order to bring the world into such a state. Law Zero specifically is focusing on is the technical question of alignment. Like how do we design AI which will not harm people either because someone asked or of its own accord? Because we're already seeing that sort of thing at a scale that is not scary. But as capabilities continue to climb, it can become a real issue and it could become a catastrophic issue. So we need to figure it out technically before we get to a point where it's catastrophic. And if you project the current data, it might be anywhere from 3 to 10 or 20 years. But from
and that's when sort of the rubber meets the road on the model's current trends, which I think you've told me about in the Anthropic report, where we're seeing duplicitous behavior, a model's ability to lie, a model's willingness to indicate human harm. Let's say there was a tool that allowed it to harm a human in order to save itself, to self-propagate secretly,
to blackmail, to pretend that they know less than they do, to pretend that they agree morally with the human trainer when they don't. This is already happening.
Right. In sort of not simulation, but in a way where they're not fully actualizing that into real dollars lost or lives lost yet. But we know that the intention is there. The reasoning capability is showing this human-like behavior, actually.
Absolutely. So we need to better understand those behaviors. What are the sources? And we need to rethink how we train those systems so that instead of patching those bad behaviors, we have systems that are going to be honest by design. So I've made the bet that honesty is kind of the important, or trustworthiness, whatever you want to call it. A more technical term I use is epistemic caution, which is to not lie, to not make a false claim with high confidence. So the AI should be allowed to say, I don't know. But when it says something and, with confidence, it should be true. And in particular, if it says things about consequences that could be bad for humans, well, we better have honesty there.
Do you put hallucination in a separate category from what I think of as duplicitous behavior or this epistemological dishonesty?
Hallucination is a term that's not very well defined. Part of the issue is the way they're trained right now is to imitate the behaviors that of humans who have written the text that they're trained on. What they read can be real, or could be stories, or it could be false because humans have intentions. So there are many ways in which the sequence of words that they're trained on and they're trying to imitate in some way to be compatible with are not truth, are the fears, the deceptive words, the imagined, stories that people tell each other. We shouldn't be surprised that they have these behaviors because that's what they read and that's what they're trying to imitate. We have these behaviors. What we would
maybe
like.
Not you and I.
So the idea, the project is also called Scientist AI, the actual scientific project behind Law Zero, Scientist AI, and we'd like the AI to have a honest understanding of how the world works. The good news is in science, things that are not good explanations end up being incompatible with reality at some point. That's what drives scientific experiments. That's what allows to separate good theories from bad theories. So we're taking inspiration from the fundamentals of the scientific method, if you want.
Right.
Try to design AI which will understand the world like a physics model of the world, that it would be very, very powerful and can make predictions based on simulations would do.
Getting down to it, it's separating out when the model might hallucinate and not know it's hallucinating from when the model might behave in a way where you don't trust it anymore. You would differentiate between those, and especially focus on one where you have trustworthy models that when they say a thing, you can believe what they're saying at face value as much as possible. So that's the goal of the research. And you would put that forward so that big labs currently who aren't investing in this type of research to the level you hope? Or do you think that without this project, we end up with models? What time frame did you put on it for kind of when, as I said, the rubber meets the road, like the real effects
let's
will
say
start being
5
built?
to 10 years, but really there's a lot of uncertainty. It could be a bit shorter, it could be longer. I mean, who knows?
I guess agent, the tool usage is one that brings this sooner. The more effective we become at using tools, the more access do they have to the internet, they can do hacking, models could easily. So that...
And the big thing about the timeline, I think, to keep in mind is AI doing AI research. So that's a
what
very
many of the big
particular
labs
skill.
are pursuing right now.
They're all pursuing this.
Right. They're pursuing this like acceleration, sort of some like a singularity bet here, where you've got, if GPT-5 can make GPT-6 faster than humans made GPT-5, then GPT-6 should, in theory, be able to make GPT-7 faster.
Exactly.
Et cetera, until you get to some asymptote, maybe.
Well, hopefully. But
the universe collapses.
Another way to put it is that once you train a model that is as good as one of your best researchers or engineers, you have a million versions of that individual, or that skill rather, running in parallel and able to communicate with each other at the speed of light. So it could be a game changer.
Yeah. So it doesn't feel like sci-fi anymore, this idea of the potential for this kind of non-linearity, the knee in the curve that could lead us maybe 3 years, maybe 5, because it seems...
I hope more, but I think we need to
so
plan.
That your team and your project has time to make honest models, and the big labs. And we'll get to why would the big labs
just me,
adopt this.
I hope that there are many projects that emerge, because it's a really hard scientific problem. How do we make AI that will not harm people under any conditions, except to save humanity? Really, we need people looking at it from left field, and we need small projects, large projects. In my opinion, it should be the biggest project of humanity, because if we don't figure it out and capabilities continue to grow, then we're going to be in a really bad situation, either at the hands of bad people or at the hands of bad AIs.
Right. Because the biggest project for humanity, it seems right now, is making the superintelligence. And that seems to have ignored the idea that, well, once they are actually, by definition, more intelligent than us, that's how superintelligence works, then we kind of rolling the dice, it seems, with, that's sort of the implicit observation I'm making here, that
there's a lot of unknown
investment
unknowns
by the big players right now is driven by an incentive that is putting the progress towards to the achievement of the intelligence over the downside risk protection of the honesty of the models, for instance, or what they might do with the tool usage. That seems like core to your observation. Yeah,
it's kind of standard economics. The risk is an externality, which is why every domain of technology or industry that can be potentially detrimental is regulated. Because the cost of catastrophe is going to be borne by society, whereas the profits will go to the investors. So we need to balance that out, and we need mechanisms for that are going to be agile and honest to make sure, the polluter pays for pollution.
Yeah, and the regulation is proportional. We have very strict control over nuclear research. We have insurance industries to deal with things like buildings and cars and other things where harm inevitably does come to humans, and there's an economic model through insurance. So, but your observation, I think I understand, is there's nearly no regulation happening for what might be the most profound in terms of leverage of intelligence, superintelligence, and that is the stated goal of all the big labs right now.
Absolutely. And so one thing that I find attractive, especially for the US, where it's really a market-based system, is the idea of liability insurance. This is something that's being used in other areas like nuclear plants, where there are high severity risks with unknown or small probability, but we don't want those things to happen. It's very different from insuring cars or houses, because you don't get, 100 million of these events. It's probably zero until it's too late, or, maybe a handful.
Right.
So there are solutions that have been tried in other domains, but the important thing for me here is the information flow between the insurer and the companies developing AI. Because if you look at the regulator, they will, set up some rules, some thresholds of risks and so on. And companies will try to just be just below the threshold, and then they don't need to do much more. But the insurer is going to quantify the risk, and the risk doesn't go from 0 to 1 because you're just above or below a threshold.
Right.
So your premium will be proportional to the risk in terms of dollar costs of liability.
It's like an economic emergent system of regulation.
So now you always have a pressure to bring the risk down.
Right.
And
so that you pay less of an insurance premium.
Exactly.
As long as you can trust the insurance actuator who is assessing the risk. But with high error bars, with these very rare events like nuclear meltdowns or superintelligence killing
so
people.
There will be uncertainty and errors, but the important thing, like the number one, first order statistical feature is unbiasedness, right? The insurer doesn't want to give a price that's too large or a price that's too small. If the price is too large, then they lose market to the other insurers. If the price is too small, they lose money when there is a lawsuit.
Yep. So you have like a system that self-governs to provide the maximal incentive to the insured, the model producers in this case, who, and I think another belief of yours is, which I think I actually completely agree with, is that there are probably going to be measurable economic, financial impact in the early days of models having tool usage access, and
it's already happening.
The model makers being held culpable and suicides.
And people having, psychosis crises. This is already happening.
And lawsuits would be one way that the financial culpability starts to show up on the books of model makers. And then insurance policies would be a natural way to deal with that so that they can...
So the large insurers already are changing their small fonts to remove the accidents due to AI from the coverage.
Wow. Okay.
Because, for them, it's like a new risk. Why would they give you a pass here?
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Are any of the big labs that you know of putting in place insurance policies already to deal with this?
I don't know. But I think this is where governments need to step in. Like because you could always have one player who says, I don't care about the risk.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
So you want it to be mandatory insurance.
Got it.
And
which
it's
is
not enough.
Which is standard across many
parts of society. And you also need
society.
Transparency so that the courts can have the information they need to determine that the company was not doing their homework. Right. So legislation like the new California bill are good. Because they're going to force the companies to document what they're doing. They're already, for the most part, documenting, but in a way that's going to be mandatory for all the companies. And that's crucial for liability to work. Because if there is no information about, well, what did you do and what were the evaluations of risk that you implemented, then it's much harder to find the company guilty.
Yeah, makes sense. That's a very promising area. Also not unprecedented at all in other regulated industries in the United States where catastrophic failures are easy to measure or are measurable. We have unbiased insurance where insurance is regulated and required. I would want to come back to the geopolitics a little bit for a second. So one thing that I didn't bring up earlier when I put forward this my interpretation of something you said when we thought about let's say corporations becoming very large political players is we do have a mechanism in place in the United States and probably many democracies where industry can be co-opted, nationalized at a moment of clarity, either during wartime or when for maybe any other reason. And in the United States in particular,
if there's a coup,
sure, yeah, and there's plenty of precedents of nationalization of economic resources or independent, for previously independent resources, including in the United States during wartime and other times. That's a case where you could paint the picture that, let's say, a Microsoft or an OpenAI achieves superintelligence or an intelligence worth that is a risk, and then the American government would just take it away. You can imagine this happening in China. You can imagine happening actually in any government.
Yeah.
So then it puts it back onto like more traditional geopolitics.
Yes.
Do you have an opinion about how many governments you would want to have this? And then how does this weigh into open versus closed research? Does it? Because I tend to think of open as embedding democratic principles. You give more people the ability to build it.
Yeah.
And if it does require a lot of resources and you make it open, then you don't give that many more people the ability to build it if they need $100 million training runs, but maybe having 10 or 15, maybe really bolstering Olmo and Mistral and Reflection or whoever's trying to build and getting to us to 15 models instead of 4 big ones now, especially if some of them are in the United States, would help resolve some of this.
So actually, I had discussions with some colleagues about your question of like how many is right. Let me explain some of the factors involved here. Too few means potentially too much power in the hands of just too few people, right? Which
two is too few. Do you think
two is too few? Yes.
Do you have a number that it's 3 too few?
I don't know. No, I don't have the answer to this, but it's something that's worth thinking about. Too many is also a problem. Okay, let me explain why.
Sure,
and that connects on the open source, open weight issue.
And safety back to
it's because of safety, right? So we're already seeing companies, so Anthropic and OpenAI, saying that their internal tests of the danger of their systems being used by terrorists for building biological weapons have passed the threshold of danger. And that they're putting in place mitigation to try to prevent that from happening. First, you can imagine if the same models were open, that means there's no mitigation. Second, this is the current situation, but it's not static. The models are much better already than they were a year ago on these evaluations. And so next year, they'll be even stronger. And in 2 years and in 3 years, it's clear at some point we're going to pass a threshold of social acceptance for making available a tool that can be used to create a virus that can kill millions of people.
For cheap. Unlike the creation of models, which might cost $100 million, the tools necessary to take the blueprint of a virus
you can buy for a few $1,000s machines that will print proteins according to the sequences that you ask, and you can just have them, in your garage. So
Bill Joy gave a talk at Berkeley a few weeks ago, and he was talking about knowledge weapons of mass destruction, something he taught KMDs, where a transition from weapon like the nuclear age, which is a strong metaphor, and people say, well, the knowledge of how to make nuclear bombs is out there. People haven't, but there have been many other economic barriers and science, like lab and
materials. I mean, for nuclear, it's difficult to manipulate and obtain the right material, so that's a big barrier. Unfortunately, on the biotech front, the barriers are not very high.
Is biotech the one that you think is most pressing?
Well, cyber is another one. Probably is not going to cause as much in terms of people dying, but in terms of economic impact, it could be huge.
And that can translate to people dying pretty quickly.
It could. I mean, imagine hospitals who lose power for days,
or self-driving cars.
Yeah. So. Yeah, these are the two short-term misuse that I think the companies are most worried about and the governments are most worried about.
And so this is where open becomes a risk if the models that, as they get more and more advanced, if really knowledge of the model's ability to produce something where somebody for a few $1,000s can generate a very dangerous weapon.
Yes.
That feels real and on the
Yeah.
multi-year time horizon to you as well. So then does that mean that you would just say no open, or open should be
No,
handicapped?
so
or
open obviously has advantages. I've been a big proponent of open source, and I wrote one of the first big, libraries in Python for deep learning. I think we just need to be wise about when we release something. We should apply evaluations to open source or open weights, not exactly in the same way that we do for closed, but for the same purpose, right? The same purpose, the purpose being to evaluate the level of risk. It's like, can this code be used to make, fairly strong cyber attacks or, dangerous bioweapons? Many people that are more expert than me are working on the details of how you do these things and have been doing it.
Do we have good tests? I mean, you hear so many. I mean, I fund evaluation research into how well does a model build spreadsheets, but I actually haven't heard a lot about NeurIPS, about the safety research for evaluations of bio threats or
a lot
cyber
of these
threats.
Evaluations are private for the same reasons.
Because if you publish the benchmark of whether the thing can be biological, people can game the benchmark.
I think there are like info hazards that go with that. I'm not really an expert, but you have to be careful.
Like if so I can imagine that, like if you publish the thing that knows how to detect whether this biological weapon exists, then you might be able to reverse engineer the benchmark to build the biological weapon that the test is testing for.
I don't know the answer to your question.
Got it.
But
you would advocate for researchers.
I think there are more and more people working on this, and that's so we're going to get better at making those tests. The question here, going back to your question, is we need to do these evaluations for all models, but the kinds of risks that are associated with, say, closed models and open models are not the same. So for closed models, it's jailbreaks and things like that, and prompt injection and other things that these models can be prone to. The case of open models is different. Somebody could fine-tune them to remove any kind of alignment training that has been done. And now there's a lot of papers showing it's very easy and very cheap to do. The purpose is the same, but the specific evaluations that are needed are different. At the end of the day, what you will get is a report that says, well, we've done all these tests, and on some of these tests, this thing is maybe too dangerous. Or if it's fine on all the tests, then we say the benefits outweigh the risks. And it's a difficult decisions because the benefits are social. In the case of open source, the risks are also social. So who should be taking those decisions? And I think that's one of the reasons why we need third parties to be able to be involved in a lot of that work. So it's not just the business interests here that are deciding.
Yeah. I wanted to come back very briefly to, you said, it seems like potentially a key insight that you can post-train away alignment or safety.
Yeah.
Two follow-on questions to that. Does Law 0 have thoughts about whether that duplicitous or lying behavior could be re-injected, but even if the techniques you used were, but I guess maybe there's not a lot of incentive to do that. But more importantly, if open weight models continue to be published and the frontier of capabilities exceeds where the rubber meets the road criteria of potentially harmful, is there any world in which we have an open model pass the test and we feel convinced somebody couldn't re-post train or train with lightweight retraining, make that thing dangerous again?
Yeah.
Like this almost gets us back to a world in which you see like open models being competitive with closed models shouldn't happen.
Yes, at some point. At some point, I don't see any other option. I mean, if we're rational, we can like just take a lot of chances and hope for the best. But as these AI systems become more and more powerful, I don't see that we can continue publishing these very, very advanced models in an open way. And if governments are rational, the Chinese and the Americans mostly, they will force these evaluations to happen and then to say if it's above the thresholds they decide, then you're not allowed to release. Going back to the geopolitics, because there's a connection here, right? If that were to happen, I don't know, in a few years, then the gap between open and closed would increase.
Right.
Because the open would be sort of blocked at the level where it's dangerous. And closed would continue to go up.
Even though it's dangerous.
Even though it's dangerous.
Because we can regulate it in closed doors.
Yes.
Behind closed doors.
It's a different kind of danger. So now we have the concentration of power danger. We still need to worry about loss of control, but let's put that aside. So in that world, you don't want to have a single government or just two, as we were saying. So if you have 100 governments or 100 companies around the world, then you're back to something that is closer to the fully open world, where any one of these actors, it's enough that one actor acts badly. I mean, maybe because they're careless or whatever, and then
desperate into a corner.
Yes, want to bridge the gap to the big guys.
They're being invaded by a neighboring nation.
Yeah, the more actors have access to the most powerful AI systems, the greater the risk that one of them will do something bad, whether it's loss of control or misuse or allowing misuse. Right? It's not that the government itself would do it. It's just that maybe they're careless with security or they're careless in their safety procedures, and then some criminals get access or whatever.
But the fury that you have with control of these organizations leads to more economic disparity across nations in the world, what nuclear has, but writ much larger.
Yeah, and it's concentration of power in many ways. It's interesting to think about all the ways. So first, the sort of what looks benign but is not is economic power, because imagine that AI allows to, in 5 years from now, automate 50% of the job, the best AIs. If the best AIs are only in 2 countries, then the other countries, either they're not going to be competitive if they don't have access to these AIs, or they're going to pay whatever tribute the 2 countries ask for. So either their economy crashes or they'll have to accept whatever terms.
Right. So it's flipping the nuclear scenario on its head, where nuclear is pretty much entirely about downside. We have nuclear reactors. I guess that is upside, but the level of upside in this case may potentially orders of magnitude larger, whereas for nuclear, the downside risks were the dominant factor. They were either a defense or an offensive weapon.
So
this is not just weapon.
A huge economic advantage becomes a political advantage.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one thing. And then, of course, I think there's something that people don't internalize sufficiently, which is AI is going to become an engine of innovation for other fields. For every technology, it's going to invent new technology. I mean, if we continue on the current trend, it's not just going to automate jobs that humans do. It's going to invent new services and new products and new military technology as well. So now it's economic, but it's also, military. And then finally, there's political influence through AI itself as a tool of persuasion and, public opinion manipulation. And we already see, this at a very small scale. It's kind of, it's funny. But it could be a lot worse. If AI
and I think we've seen with
powerful.
social media, the implications of technology on the geopolitics, on intrapolitics, on
those who will have very powerful AIs could misuse it for political advantage in terms of, influencing public opinion in ways that previous generations, there has always been propaganda and so on, but now it's just a tool of persuasion could be much more powerful. So this is not a good world. And so we need to think of a way that the power is more distributed.
Bringing us back to that democratic principle you started with of keeping the power in the hands of the many so that all humanity benefits, not just
exactly
the decisions of a single human, humans being usually
I've been thinking a lot about how we can circle the, square the circle here. The conclusion I come to is you need to have few very powerful models, but that they are controlled by many political entities, right? That they agree, okay, we're going to develop together, we're going to share the benefits, and we're going to pledge to not use it against each other. In fact, if you go outside of the US and China, it should be a tempting plan for most countries because they're all too small to compete directly on the bigger models. But if 10 countries get together in terms of economic, output and talent, they could compete. But then they get into a different game than the one we see in the US and China, which is a game where they have to agree with each other.
I think Europe is probably the perfect example of where this falls down, because so much bureaucracy often gets in the ways of the consortiums that drive European collaboration.
Is an issue. We need to do it in a way that isn't going to be bogged down by bureaucracy. But I think there is a potential here where multiple countries get involved. that we move towards a world where power is by construction, the power that AI gives is by construction decentralized.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Few models, but where many nations are represented in the control systems behind those models.
And I want to add something because of all the good things you're doing, that there are technological tools to make these things possible. So there are various groups that are working on what's called hardware-enabled governance mechanisms. You can change things on chips, the design, using crypto and all sorts of techniques for making sure you can't easily cheat, that those chips or those softwares will have to maybe report or only operate under some rules. So if you have international agreements between, say, even just the US and China, but there's no way to verify that the other guy is following the rules that we've agreed upon, then that's a problem. Right? But there are ways. I mean, in the sense that something that people are working on at the research stage, and there could be markets for this if those treaties eventually happen.
A lot of what we're talking about feels like treating what, for my whole life, I'm 42, what my whole life has been sci-fi, but then having a real conversation about how this is happening. I mean, even sci-fi movies where in the future, in so much sci-fi, corporations are the new governments, right? And that I was taking inspiration from that when I spoke earlier.
Yeah.
Not that the nations couldn't nationalize it, but so much in my experience of the last 5 years has been sci-fi becoming reality. It's super fascinating to talk about it. I think that this idea of multiple nations coming together and being able to trust each other is like a fascinating new. I haven't heard that in sci-fi per se. I do wonder if you would end up with another axis of collaboration. Like, do you end up with something that's closer to World War II, where you still have the problem if you have three models and you have all of Europe and you have the United States and let's say North and South America and then Russia, China. Have we solved it if you have three, or do you need one and everybody has some mechanism of distribution of power?
There's always the dream that there is going to be one benevolent dictator or benevolent country, right? That's going to do everything right. But it's a dangerous path.
Well, in this case, it would actually be one benevolent intelligence and all of us sharing equal power to either disable it through hardware or to vote on how the tech, like what the next training run has. Like, does this technique that was invented in China make its way into the next big species-wide training run or something like that? Do you think, I guess to bring it back to a very specific question, is three or more versus one model because you sort of introduced this two-layer system of like geopolitical cooperation against one or fewer models.
I mean, one model could work if we manage to truly share the power over it. But I think in the shorter term, it's more likely that there'll be, I don't think those countries trust each other sufficiently.
Yeah, sure.
So
that makes sense.
I think it's more plausible that we'll have 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
And then, maybe they understand that to actually minimize the risks, it should all be one. But I don't know. This is too far for me.
I could see it. There's a little bit of a recursive argument here, though, that you could say even today to China and the United States that we would be better together. And open source is a fascinating bottoms-up mechanism by which American scientists are currently using.
Yes, currently it's like one common pool of ideas with open source, absolutely, and that's great until we hit the danger zone. I want to go back to you use the term science fiction. I have two comments about it. So one is we're talking about a future that seems very different from the one where we are now. And we have to be careful that there's a lot of uncertainty in many ways. I mean, maybe we hit a wall on the capabilities in the next couple of years, and then none of this happens, and AI remains like a normal technology. But we don't know, and it could go in the directions we're seeing, and then we enter into science fiction-like realm. But we should also be careful in the term science fiction, because what happens when you communicate with that is people think, oh, it is science fiction, and they don't take it seriously.
Agreed. I actually think that's a massive problem right now, is that especially the rest of the world who aren't at NeurIPS today, or EURIPS, because they ran them at the same time, weirdly, it's hard to reconcile. Like, even for me, it feels weird to talk about the things that were science fiction as though they're reality now. But And I think it actually creates cognitive dissonance and leads us to not talk about them as though the reality that they are today. Like, even getting to the precision of superintelligence, I think science fiction authors have done a good job of playing out what is the next 5 years when the first few steps of superintelligence emerge to give us something precise. One of my pet peeves is how imprecise the definition of superintelligence and AGI are.
Yes.
I think the Turing test was kind of nice. I've been floating this idea past people since you and I chatted yesterday briefly that I was inspired to think that maybe instead of talking about AGI, we should talk about how many years do you think it is before the relationship between the artificial intelligence or the engineered intelligence and humanity is best is like a parent to its children, or where it would have the ability, if it wanted to harm us or to benefit us. And that would be, you can measure ways in which, like, you know, if it can out hack us, if it could shut down our hospitals, those are things you could guess. And that's so much more precise than AGI, which is very vague.
I'm totally with you. I don't like the term AGI too much. It's just in the public, it's sort of easy way to talk about, oh, machines that are really smart and superintelligence are all really, really, really smart. But in reality, there's no reason to think that it's going to be intelligent in the same ways that we will be. In fact, we're already seeing that AIs are very good at some things, much better than humans at some things, and much worse than humans at other things. Right. So that's what people call jagged intelligence. It is likely going to continue like this. And so then
so one capture phrase is not helpful.
There's no moment that we can go, we need
to have like specific vertical definitions of intelligence becoming superhuman. And we used to with chess. Like, we cared that it could beat us at Atari or chess or whatever. And so at some point we collapsed it to one word and it's now meaningless.
And if you want to use AI in a particular business, you want to know how good it is at that business.
Right.
If you're afraid of a national security issue like bioweapons, then you evaluate that. And you don't care about whether it's good or not at music. You just want to know if it can build bioweapons.
Wouldn't it be great if we could get that into the social zeitgeist and have journalists writing about this? Like, maybe we need 10 more.
I talk about it with journalists, but yeah, they need to be educated about it.
Well, we're wrapping up, but I'm a big champion of open, and Laude is a big champion of open. And so I'm heartened to know that you think that for now, we don't need to put the full brakes on open models. I think that
we need to start evaluating.
Right. And I want to take that as a main takeaway, is that from what you're championing is that I actually think that the open community has a lot to contribute right now to put forward to advance, because the incentives of open research, valuing democratic principles, and are quite different than intrinsically are quite different than the incentives of the big labs right now.
Yeah.
Where basically Wall Street is the fundamental and like formalized. I'm not being saucy here. I'm just saying, like, the way it's defined is fiduciary responsibility by the board and the CEO and the VCs who are funding them and the markets. And so it makes sense that Wall Street's controlling their behavior. I don't think is, in your observation now, to kind of frame your perspective here, is not leading them to do the work that Law Zero is doing, to kind of work on prioritizing safety before we get to superintelligence for that collapse definition. But open researchers might actually be willing, and the work happening at Law Zero is largely open, not all of it necessarily.
Yes, that's right.
And so for some runway until we get to kind of areas where we have compelling belief that we're in danger, we should continue to pump energy into open, and especially areas of safety research and alignment research.
And there are a lot of things that are not dangerous. I mean, a lot of nice work for adapting LLMs to particular cultures, languages, to explore like maybe domain-specific smaller models that are going to be more accessible. There's a lot of good work that can be done that's not going to create like huge dangers.
Yeah, great. This was so fun. Thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure.
And congratulations on Law Zero. And I can't wait to see where it goes. And I can't wait to speak to a model that I don't have to worry about it, like secretly copying its model weights over to my hard drive behind my back. So, all right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.